So we're talking about identity and who I am not. And I thought I was praying so hard when we thought about this series. Jay and I were talking, like I was sharing with some of you, how long discussions we've been having, just the future, the trajectory, like where we're going and where is culture. So just so you guys know, you can pray for us, for Jay and I. Like we are. It's what we feel very powerfully that God's called us to, is to this movement, but also how to disciple each other, but also where are we as a culture? Like where is the church? You have the world, which is the cosmos, which is the analogy of the New Testament, and then you have the church. You have the ecclesia, the called out people. So constantly we are talking, and we're praying, learning, but also understanding what is the need out there, what's happening, what is going on in the world. Lord, where do you need us? Where do you need all of us to move towards? So in that context, obviously we're like, okay, identity. Like talk about identity. Talk about the identity crisis right now in the world. Like Zach's response was so important. I mean, we're laughing in the room, but unfortunately, that's where we are. An 8-year-old is bombarded with not knowing who they are, and you have the world telling them who they are, and it's such a tragic state. So talking about identity, so I'm spending a lot of time praying and thinking, and for the next 6 weeks we're going to unpack this. But I thought to myself, everyone asks me, who am I? Like you ask, who are you in LA? How many answers would you get? Like, you get like 8 answers. It's like, I'm this slash this, and I started calling this city a city of slashes. Like, I'm this slash this slash this slash this, which is fine. I'm that way too, Jay's that way, we're all that way. I mean, we have multiple things, it's artists, whatever. But who am I is like so many things. I went back this week to Genesis, to the beginning of it all. How did it all start? What was the motivation? What brought us here? Why? Who started it? And where does our identity come from? Like what is the source? God, take us to the source. So that's my hope in the next 8 weeks for us as a movement, as a community, is we start from the source. And this is the problem also, which I think, I might be wrong, but I think my analysis of observing the world, even in terms of mental health and psychology and therapy, is there's a lot of cognitive behavioral modification going on, but there's no analytical side to go deep into this root of why we're struggling the way we're struggling. And why I bring that as a panel to just leave it is that's the same thing that's happening in the spiritual realm. It's the same thing. We're modifying symptoms, we're modifying behaviors aesthetically. We're not going to the root, to the source of what it is. Like, what's the problem? So when I went back to Genesis, and this is I have 3 things that was highlighted for me, and we can add more. I would love to continue this discussion, and you guys can think with me because I'm thinking with you. I read Genesis, and in seminary we actually read this translation of Genesis. This is Everett Fox's translation. It's the Torah. So this is the first 5 books, which is the Pentateuch, and Everett Fox translated it literally like no one else, closest to actually the Hebrew, but also the Semitic languages. So going back, this was interesting, and I'm going to read some verses from this, but actually understanding God, how did this all start? Where did this start? And how can we understand identity from your perspective? And first thing that came to my mind is the first verse. How does the Bible start? In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. If you compare all the Babylonian, the Mesopotamian, even the Hindu Vedas, all the scriptures, it's so fascinating. Most of them start in a very juxtaposed manner, which is the human beings have an idea of God, right? It's God, it's man to God. The Bible says in the beginning, God, which is a fascinating proposition. Number one, the first thing is, I am not autonomous. I sat on that for so long because I thought to myself, if only that one truth we could grasp across the earth. I don't care if you believe in God or not, that's not the argument. And as we go through this, make some notes or whatever you can. I'm going to keep talking about this because this will be very useful to engage with unchurched people, to engage with people who don't believe or who have all these questions. Well, a fair question to ask is, did you make yourself? Right? Isn't that a fair question to start with? Like how did you come about? Okay, I'm time plus matter plus chance. Interesting. Great. If that's who you are, then why do you care? Why do you care about anything? You have no right to care. Because if you're just time plus matter plus chance, if you're a parent, why do you care about your child? If you have a girlfriend, like if that's all that's going on within you, oh no, something deeper is going on. Great. Did you put yourself together? Who brought you into being? And so this is if so Paul Tripp talks about this. He talks about the idea of ownership. He says the culture is lost today because of this very idea that is skewed from the foundations, which is everyone thinks they're their own self-made person. Which is the confusion in the world today. Is once you lose the source, you think I'm a self-made human being. And Nietzsche pointed this out about 200 years ago. He said, you killed God and the 21st century will be the bloodiest century in all of human history. That's exactly what happened. Because when you kill God, because Nietzsche's argument was, what would you replace it with? You? Because you didn't come on your own. So then identity, so this is why I think tonight the question is to ask what I'm not before you even can go to who I am. See? Who I am, great. Can you first establish who you're not? Because if you can establish who you're not, then your who I am will have so much more solid footing. And I think we're missing that in our culture completely without establishing the first of who I'm not. And so going back to the Bible, it says, in the beginning, God created. And then it's so interesting, and then the idea is now because I'm not autonomous, which means I'm not alone. Pause for a second. Can we all imagine tonight in LA if everyone understood that one truth, that I'm not alone? Because we live in one of the most isolated and depressed cities in the world. The top 5 cities, the big metropolises, this is the one central concern. People are lonely. People are alone and they're grasping for straws and relationships to fill that void. The argument is, you can do it all you want till kingdom come. Is that going to really satisfy you though? Is that going to fill the void? Problem is, you have not understood that you're not your own. You haven't built yourself, you're not autonomous, which means you're not alone, which then means now the question begs is, who created me? Who made me? What is the meaning and purpose? You cannot get to who I am without asking the questions, without asking the right questions in the right pathway. So I think that's so important when God breathed his breath, his ruach, and this is where Richard Dawkins, the world's famous atheist, got stuck when Bishop Rowan Williams asked him, well, where do you think you got language? And where do you think you got consciousness? And he got stuck. He couldn't answer those 2 questions. He said, I don't know. So back to the question, because you don't know, would you concede that you didn't just come on your own? Like somebody created you. And to form an identity, first idea is I'm not autonomous, is a position of humility. That's what's lacking in our culture again. Because if I concede to the fact that I have not created myself, guess what? Now I have to become submissive to the one who created me. Which goes back to the axiom of Jesus. He who loses their life will what? Will find it. Right? So how do we understand that kind of a truth? And bigger question for us tonight, how do we start conversations like this with Paul or anyone who's not even believing in God, who's struggling, say, with suicide? I've been dealing with something like that very recently. Is at a fundamental level, is your life your own? Which means the word is responsibility. Are you willing to take enough responsibility for yourself? Which means you have to really awaken yourself to the idea that you didn't create yourself. And I really want us to pay attention to that, because if we can get that into our being from God and then pass it on to others, this changes everything. This changes everything at a very fundamental level. And I'll argue this, all the spirituality, all the prayer, all the things that are going on in the Christian scene, God bless their hearts. I'm not against it. I'm no one to judge it. But the problem I'm noticing fundamentally is, even us Christians, including myself, many a times I live as if I'm autonomous. I claim to believe in God. I do all these things, but when I sleep at night, I'm divorced from my core identity that I am not autonomous. I have not come into this body, mind, and soul on my own. Somebody created me, and that somebody happens to be pretty smart and pretty intelligent, which means it begs so many questions for me to ask about my life, right? But to move on, number 2, this is, I'm not erroneous. This is fascinating. How many people that you guys spend time discipling, I've spent time, is like, something's wrong with me. Something deep within me is flawed. I have spent the last month, uniquely enough, I don't know why, asking a lot of people I'm having dinners with, one question is, I've been trying to understand shame. I've been trying to understand shame a lot, in a very deep sense. Like, what is shame? Like, where does it come from? What does that feel like? What does that look like? How does it manifest itself? And shame and guilt. Shame and guilt, right? So like 2 panels. I don't think there's any human being who doesn't experience shame or guilt, right? Just two quick definitions of shame and guilt. We all know this. What is guilt? Guilt is when you do something wrong, you feel guilty. What is shame?
You hide it.
You hide it, but
you feel like condemned.
Yeah. Shame is I am wrong. I'm inherently flawed. That's shame. Guilt is associated to an act. Shame is associated to the self.
Interesting.
Right? Who am I not? This one hits very close to home for me, because I am not erroneous. I was not made, the one who made me did not make an error. He didn't flounder on his job when he created me. Wow, really? Sam, really? I said, really? Yes. And I'm talking to very strong Christians. So if you feel unworthy of love, if you feel unworthy, you feel all these things, inherently what's going on? What is going on deeply? Kierkegaard picked this up 200 years ago like no one else. He picked the idea of like the self meeting the self and going into despair, because he picked the idea that when I go really deep, what is I somewhere somehow feel that something's flawed with me. Something's wrong with me inherently. Now that's a paradox. It's a yes and a no, but fundamentally, you're not. See, you're not fundamentally in error. You are not flawed in the one who made you. How do I know that? How many scriptures can we quote? How many scriptures can we quote from throughout? Psalm 137, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Oh, how precious are your thoughts to me. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Every day of mine, the psalmist says, was laid even before I was born. Well, what do all those things tell us? And by the way, I'm just speaking this to myself even tonight. This is so hard because we are sinful. It's hard. It's so difficult. This is what the enemy is robbed from us, is robbing us every day. Is if all of us build that kind of a sense of identity to say, you know what? 1, I didn't come on my own. I'm not autonomous. Number 2, I'm not erroneous. Can you imagine what that does to a self? If those 2 things sink in deeply, the God who made me, and He's God, and He loves me so much that He made me this way, I don't think He made a mistake. With every single intricate detail, he did not make a mistake. God does not make mistakes. In my notes, I think the paradox. Jay will beat me up later, but I will endure the torture for Jesus. Ouch. You know, the paradox of this idea is so interesting. If you study psychology, if you study a lot of people in this area, the ones who are closest to having everything are the ones who are often the most discontent. I'm going to say that one more time. The ones who are closest to having everything are the ones who are actually often the most discontent. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that ironic? The ones who almost have everything are often the ones who are the most discontent. I can sit here and give you stories all night of people who don't have much at all. But you be around them, you'll be filled with so much joy. I have one story to share in this space. It's Fanny Crosby. I don't know if you guys know Fanny Crosby's story. She wrote about 9,000 hymns. She was the one who wrote Pass Me Not a Gentle Savior, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. She wrote all those hymns for us. Fanny Crosby was born 6 weeks after she was born. She became blind. They used the wrong medicine on her eyes, and she became blind. And she spent the rest of her life she never saw anything. And then at her deathbed, she had sores on her back. She had all those, and she wrote 9,000 hymns. And somehow she found out that she was the most content. Not only the most content, she gave us the hymn, What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And this is what she said. It's so interesting. Some priest went to her and said, Fanny, if you could only see, and you could have had so many gifts. You know what she responded? This blows my mind. I don't know how people get to a faith like that. I just don't understand this. I don't. I'm honest confession. This is what she said. She said, do you know that if at birth, if I was able to make one single petition to God when I was born, if I were to ask God one thing, she said, I would have asked God to make me be born blind. Like how? Wait, what? And then she says, because when I get to heaven, the first face that shall ever gladden my sight would be that of my Savior. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't relate to it. I'm too selfish for that. I don't get it. But what I'm learning is, and I have a couple of stories of villagers in India, farmers that I went and met them. These people, that simple life they have, they're the most content. You be around them. And then I come here to our, intellectual, Western, civilized world where people have almost everything and they're the most discontent. And I have never observed, anthropologically, I have not observed this much self-hate outside of the Western culture. Of self-hate, of lack of self-worth. This is for something for all of us to think about, by the way. I'm leaving these ideas. Think about these things deeply, and please talk to me, talk to Jay, talk to us. We need to understand these things at a very deep level, because the church is not waking us up to these very deep, what would you call it? Disease, really. Because unless we don't diagnose the problem, then we cannot move to the cure. Yeah? So that's why the question, who am I not? I am not on my own, I'm not autonomous, and I am not erroneous. And if I can understand, if I can grasp that. Now, I've spoken to several people who said, Sam, intellectually I get it, emotionally it doesn't translate. It doesn't translate to me emotionally. That I am worthy, and I'm beautifully and wonderfully made. All those ideas are great, Sam. I've heard that all my life. But somehow I just can't emotionally get there. I can't live in it. I don't feel it. And so that's an interesting thing we're going to unpack in the next several weeks, because as we unpack that together, it'll be very useful for us for our own lives, but also for our discipleship. Right, and last one, this is I'm not harmless. So 2 positives and 1 more, not negative, but actually sort of in both worlds, is the awareness that I'm not harmless. What do I mean by that? What do we mean by I'm not harmless? I think Jordan Peterson has a quote. He said, the harmless man is not a good man. He says, the harmless man is not a good man. The dangerous man is the good man who can keep it under control. Which means, to unpack that idea a little bit, we need to awaken to the fact that we have so much ability to choose and to will something. And that makes a huge difference both in our lives and in other people's lives. Which means I am not harmless. I can cause a lot of harm to myself and to the people around me. This is where I go back. I want to go to this translation when he talks about Eve. You know, when the serpent came to Eve and enticed her, right? He said, the woman said to the snake, and this is the closest translation, from the fruit of the other tree in the garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, God said, you are not to eat from it, and you're not to touch it, lest you die. But the snake said to the woman, die? You will not die. You will not die. Rather, God knows, he includes God in the conversation. He says, God knows that on the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you'll become like gods, knowing good and evil. What is the one lie in our culture today? You are God. Everything is in you. You don't need. Why do you need him, her, it, universe, whatever? Oh, by the way, all your healing is within you. Like, it's all you. It's within you. We think, this is the challenge for all of us, we think that's the church, or we think that's the unchurched. I want to challenge us, it's very much prevalent within the church. That same ideology is seeped in so much, but it's garbed in other ways. It doesn't come out that way. Because we think we are, and we try to manage and control our lives. And that was the lie when he said, you will become gods. And then here's the part. The woman then, this is the fascinating part I told you during communion. The woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to contemplate. What blew my mind in the scripture is how much it talks about the tree being so good. 3 verses in Hebrew talking about the aesthetic of the tree, not the fruit. Think with me on this for a second. I have a lemon tree. He saw my lemon tree. I'm going there. I'm not looking at the tree. I'm looking at the lemons. No one's coming and looking at the tree. We're looking at the lemons and the fruit. Oh, that's such good fruit. For some reason, it was the tree. The woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to contemplate. What I'm not harmless. Because what she does, she saw, she took, she ate, and she gave. What I'm not is I'm not harmless because I have the power to choose, and I can choose right or I can choose wrong. And that will either make or break nations. That's what I'm not. I'm not harmless. Wow. How about taking responsibility for that before you even go to the question of who I am? Right?
Yeah, it's really good.
Who are you? No. Who are you not? I can cause a lot of harm, but I can cause a lot of good. I can do 2 things. Jesus took the cup. He didn't have to, but he took it. She took the fruit. Question on the table, what are we seeing? What are we taking? What are we consuming, eating? And what are we giving? Like, what does that look like? But that flows from the place of identity, from the source. Is if you realize that you're not autonomous, and you realize that you're beautifully and wonderfully made, The argument to be made is probably when you stick to the vine. Jesus said, I'm the vine and you are the branches. Outside of me, you can do nothing. Remain in me, abide in me, John 15. Well, then the argument is, I think I will see what he wants me to see. I will take what he wants me to take. I will eat. I will fill my body, mind, and soul with what he wants me to fill. And then I will give what he wants me to give. Problem is, the enemy, Satan, the serpent, came and said, no, let's divorce him. You do this on your own. See, eat, see, take, eat, and give. That's where the world is today. And unfortunately, the church is struggling with this to truly ask the question. Not the pastors, not Sam, not Jay, not anyone. God owns me, which means I'm not my own. And I'm made in his image, Imago Dei. I'm not faulty. What does God want me to see? What does God want me to take? What does God want me to eat? And what does God want me to give? I have one more thought and I'll wrap this up. I think if those three come together as a panel for us, when we move to the question of who am I think those answers will come from the outflow of this kind of an understanding of identity. Yeah? When you understand this at that level, when you answer, now who am I think it will be hard to divorce those answers from this kind of a foundation. And then, going back to my last thought of God's response, how did God respond when God showed up? God asked three questions, and I want to close with that. We're going to stay with these three questions as our triad of identity for the next 8 weeks. So remember these three questions. These three questions are going to be kind of like the canopy around which we're going to center all of our discussion. Because I think the questions that God asked, those three questions are questions for all of us tonight. And next week we're going to move into the next question. It's going to be interesting. We'll write answers again, but it's going to be under these three real kind of a rubric, right? So now they heard the sound of God walking in the garden in the busy time of the day. This is when they went and they covered themselves, right? Because they already ate the fruit. Yahweh God, amid the trees of the garden, Yahweh called to the human and said to him, first question, what did God ask them? Where are you?
Oh, yeah.
Where are you? Second question, God asked them, who told you?
Oh, yeah.
Third question, what are you doing? Talk about identity. That's the rubric. Right? Where are you? Sam, where are you? It's what, January 2022? Tonight. Where are you, Sam? Number two, who told you? Number three, what are you doing? So this is those are the three questions, but I'm landing on this triad. we're calling the identity triad, which is if you look at this, where are you? That's position, right? Who told you? That's revelation. What are you doing? Is action. My position, my revelation, my action. My position, my revelation, and my action. Constantly, if we ever have to have one map for the rest of our lives, to ask ourselves these three questions every day in the morning. What is my position? Where am I today? Like, where are you? Second question, who told you? Mean, what kind of voices am I listening to? What's my revelation today? Whose voices am I listening to? Who told you? Number three, what are you doing? Action. So if you go back to our three things we spoke about, the first one is what? I'm not autonomous, meaning my position, I'm not alone. Follow this train of thought here. I'm not autonomous, which means my position, my standing is I am not alone. That's my position, right? Number two, revelation, right? Which is I am not erroneous, is I am going to listen to the voice of God, not the enemy, to say that I am beautifully and wonderfully made. That's my revelation. if we have that revelation, I think you understand your worth. I sat in a car recently 3 days ago, and this person was in a very, 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 very dark place, and what came out of the mouth was, I'm not worthy of love. Revelation. Who told you? Who told you that? Good question. Who told you that? It's the enemy, right? It's the enemy's voices. You're not worthy. You're not good enough. You're not able. You can't. Something's wrong with you. Do you see yourself? The den of dragons, it's dark. There's no hope. That's revelation. Number 3 is, what are you doing? Which is, right? So I'm not autonomous. I'm not erroneous, right? And I think when we talk about I'm not harmless, action, that's the part which is tricky. That's the part we need to take responsibility for, which is, as I wake up in the morning, what are my actions? What am I doing? Are my actions giving life or taking life? Both to myself and to others. And I'd argue, if you're harmful to yourself, you will be harmful to others. If you're harming yourself with the negative talk, with the lies of the enemy, you will struggle to be life to someone else. You need the revelation from God. You need the position from God. You need the revelation from God, and you need the action from God for yourself. I need it for myself before even your most intimate person next to you. If we don't get that, we will destroy. I'll even say this, we'll destroy the most intimate relationships. We will sabotage those so quickly. If this thing doesn't settle in our deepest being. And if that's not there, then I think we should pray really hard for God to, like, speak and sink these into our soul. So those were some thoughts. I just love the verse in Hebrews, I will never leave you nor forsake you, because we're not alone. Amen.
Amen.
I think we're not alone. We're not alone. God is with us. We're not alone. And that's the lie that we really need to encounter. So, thoughts, questions, just reflections.
I love it. I mean, it makes so much sense, like, what you believe in, and around those 3 things would definitely form your identity.
Right.
And those are, like, the 3 main, like this, I have nothing profound to say other than, like, this is great. Yeah. It's really resonating.
Yeah, I think most people are struggling with these things, and this has come out of a lot of, like, I would say, lack of a better word, just pastoral work. It's heartbreaking to see how many people who love Jesus are struggling with this.
Yeah.
At least who are on their way, I would say, to get that kind of an identity, and struggling to understand these 3 things. What's my position? What's my revelation? And what's my action? Like, what am I not? I'm not those things. I will not take that. So anyway, any more thoughts, reflections?
I love what you said, and I'm going to use this. I mean, it's such a great ministry example when someone's struggling with something in their life, to remind them the one who made you didn't make a mistake.
Right,
When
right.
people are just like trial after trial,
That's,
like
yeah.
feeling defeated. That's such a tangible sentence that really is
Right.
like, oh, I'm not a mistake.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really good.
And I think I like that, because that ties into shame, right? So that's the thing. Guilt is one, but shame. People are under the yoke of shame.
Yeah.
Like there's something generational about it. There's something, I don't know what's going on. I touch anyone. It doesn't take 5 minutes to understand that they feel there's something inherently wrong with them. I don't know if you guys experience that in your work, like there's something inherently wrong with me, which means whatever good comes to me, I'll push it away. I'm not worthy of it, all that stuff. And when something happens, I can't touch it. Something's wrong with me. So so that ties in. Well, if you really are a Christian, at least on that path, someone like we keep throwing Paul under the bus, but now he's kind of like our,
Bless
he's
him.
kind of like our, bless him. He's kind of like our scapegoat or whatever.
Yeah.
But Paul
Mhm.
also will be a fascinating question to ask him. Forget God, dude. Do you struggle with shame?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how would that question resonate with him, right?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see their responses. You know?
And I was thinking too, like, even within the church, like, let's say they tick the box of autonomous.
Right.
I think that the self-hatred and the shame.
Yeah. Right.
Like, I just finished a documentary on men who buy sex.
Mhm.
So, and most of them that we interviewed, they struggle with sex addiction, and most of them were pastors
Wow.
at the time of like buying sex with women and children, and some eventually like ended up raping people and served time in prison, and it just
Wow.
like the wheels came off.
Right.
But it's like they definitely believed in God
Right.
and felt like under his authority, but
Right.
then feeling like there was something inherently wrong with them.
Right.
That was like the
Right.
crack
Right.
that
right.
the enemy used to just
Yeah.
like
Get in and
get
yeah.
in, and then they believed it, and they had this like dual life,
Yeah.
and then like the darker one just sort of mushroomed over until it destroyed their life.
Wow.
But and then so the harmless thing is really
Yeah.
interesting, because like if the wheels come off with
Exactly.
the shame, you start believing it, then
Right.
you really
Yeah.
can
You
create
can cause
harm.
a lot of harm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's why I think that landing, why I was led by God just to land that I'm not harmless,
yeah,
is that revelation will wake us up. It has to wake us up. Like
Yeah.
wow, I can do a lot of damage if the first two things are not in place.
yeah,
See, if I don't get, I can do subconsciously I can do a lot of damage. Forget consciously.
Mhm.
See, you can mean really well, even in your most intimate relationships. You can mean really well, but you cause a lot of harm,
yeah,
both to yourself and to the family, to the children,
yeah,
because we're not harmless.
yeah,
Eve wasn't harmless. Human beings, we have the power, man. I think that's what makes us human. Is God somehow gave us that much power
Mhm.
to will something.
yeah.
That's power. That's too much. Yeah. So you
Well,
guys, yeah.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, like the first question I have, like, where are you?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because like a lot of times as Christians we'll talk about, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
But the Adam and Eve story actually kind of create like that answer is kind of true, right?
Yeah.
What it really is like talking about shame. They're hiding in the shrubs, the bushes, behind the tree line. Like when God's like, God obviously knows exactly where they are.
Right.
Like they're hiding, and that tree line is that shame guard. Like I'm shameful of this, so I'm
Right.
back here.
Hmm.
And I almost like to say it's not where are you? It's not the question, or it's not the statement of you're exactly where you're supposed to be. It's you were exactly where you're supposed to be,
And you move.
and then you moved.
That's right.
Mhm.
So you got to get back.
You gotta
to
get
it.
back. Right.
And then who told you to move? Why would you listen to somebody that's
That's right.
not me?
Right. Right.
Like I'm
Because- yeah,
clearly
right.
not telling you you're worthless.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
So why would you listen to that?
Right.
Like as an athlete, if I'm playing, let's just say soccer. I think most people know that one. So if I'm playing soccer, and the opposing team tells me, "Oh, you're offside. You need to come over here instead." I'm not going to listen to them because I clearly know you don't have my best interest at heart here, right?
Right.
And you want me to go over there because then the whistle will blow.
Right.
And so why don't we have that mentality whenever you're hearing something negative, even from somebody else? Who's speaking from them?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think Jay brought up one of my biggest. He opened a can of worms. He triggered me rather. Today's culture in the world on Instagram, world of mental health.
Mhm.
You are great. You are exactly where you need to be.
Mhm.
You don't have to just embrace yourself, And 30 years ago, I think I was reading some studies on this, on psych studies on this, where it shifted, where a few psychologists moved from that whole idea of because therapist's job became 30 years ago. You come first to say nothing's wrong with you, you're good. I'm just going to keep affirming you and keep where has that gotten us?
Yeah.
And Jay makes such a fantastic point exegetically, which is, where are you? Which means, wait, you were there, but you moved. You moved from your shalom. You moved from wholeness. You need to get back there. Well, guess what? That's a journey of eternity. To keep moving forward. See, to keep moving towards that shalom. If somebody tells you, oh, you're exactly where you are, right. Who's going to help me grow? Who's going to help me move back to that place? And we're on that journey. That's discipleship. That's the whole idea. So that's a fantastic observation, which is like, yeah, you can't be I can't be where I'm at, and making me comfortable there. We're not going to go anywhere with that. So, and one more, yeah.
I was just gonna, I really appreciate these questions or these kind of statements. Like the I am not autonomous.
Right.
I just think is so huge, and just I think we try to be our own. We try to be our own gods, really.
Right.
Even just reflecting on, we may agree we're not autonomous, but then what layers of our lives are we living in autonomy?
Correct.
And
right.
just kind of thinking, like, okay, we can have a believer who believes this, but it's very much living in certain areas of their life where they are acting autonomous, and then what does that do? It can kind of put you then in control, which then invites, almost like feeds into the following of like, you're kind of aware of your brokenness,
right?
And you're caught in the cycle, of shame and guilt, and
right.
It just kind of cycles out of control. But just really embracing, I think these will, and like meditating on these things and getting them within our being, will allow us to really just have the fruits of the Spirit, to be kind of joyful, to be free.
Right.
Because I was walking down the sidewalk, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday, and I just felt a little tired and was like, do I look any different than the people I'm passing on the street, like as a believer? And was just kind of convicted of like, we need to be, not that we always need to, we can't be real, but it's like, why am I not like smiling at everyone, or these kind of questions? And then I'm sure this is kind of where we're going, but even in this way, kind of like, without looking at it through the lens of Jesus, you can kind of feel the heaviness and like the responsibility and the weightiness of the I'm not erroneous, but then I can see how it's like, okay, I can take that initial point, but then like once I make a mistake, right, then I'm guilty, and then that starts to turn into identity and shame.
Right,
It's like,
precisely.
Even pointing to what you're talking, I'd never read the translation with the tree versus the fruit.
Yeah, the fruit.
Thinking eventually to the cross or the tree.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So those are just a few thoughts, but really, really appreciate the way you broke it down, and just the first one, I'm convicted about that.
Yeah.
I loved the story you said about, like even taking your own life. It's not your life to take.
Yeah.
And I feel like if everyone just came to that humble knowledge.
I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
you're totally
I have a
fine.
work dinner.
Good.
over in Santa Barbara. I guess we're in Santa
No
Barbara.
problem.
Where are we?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to hop over there. But
Yes.
this
Do your
is so
thing.
awesome
Yeah.
to keep thinking and all that.
Absolutely.
Don't me interrupt.
But if we could actually get to that humble position where we actually realize it's not my life
Yeah.
to take.
Right.
It's also not my life to define myself how I want.
Right.
Right?
Right,
It's also
right.
it's also, you also lose sight of, I think that's a lot of the cultural issues. I know we got in the last discussion, so have we, where we've talked about how, or even going back to your card saying I'm not a woman, like the whole like pronouns thing going on in culture right now. It's, if you actually if everyone saw big picture
Right.
of like, I am God's child, and I'm like, you're not even getting to the nuance of what my pronouns are.
No, right.
Like you
right.
don't even care,
Right.
because you're so, but now culture's so focused on, I am so important
Correct.
that everything about me has to be defined,
Right.
and everything has to be celebrated.
Right.
And you're going, whoa, you are
Yeah.
so selfish
Right. Right. Right.
and so egotistical.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's being conveyed under this veil of like righteousness.
Right.
And you're going, no, like, no. Like, there's one true north here.
That's it.
And if you focus on that, all the other stuff kind of disappears.
Yeah.
It's like this crazy weight. Like if you're living like that, then everything's up to you. It's just
It's everything up to you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Can you imagine if every decision you made, you put that much emphasis? It's like, you are, like, you are not an efficient human being in
Yeah.
any capacity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more thoughts? Any more reflections, questions, or agree? I'm just trying to think here.
One thing I fail pretty often in is that same mentality, but in a different, it manifests differently for me. It's like what are you doing?
What are you doing? Yeah.
Because if it's not my life, it's not my time, they're not my resources. What am I doing with these things?
Mhm.
Because they're not mine.
No.
Like
Right.
if you loan me your car, I'm gonna treat it a
Right.
certain way. It's
Right.
not my car.
Right.
But how, like, it's not my life. How am I
Right. Stewarding that.
stewarding that
Right.
in that time?
Mhm.
Yeah, and another concern with the typical Christianity today is the blasé mentality from the pulpit to the congregation is grace will cover everything, God loves you, so everything's going to be okay. As opposed to if you look at the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, we actually apparently we grow much more better when we take more responsibility.
Mhm.
Like responsibility is what gives life meaning.
Mhm.
See, the more the responsibility Jung talks about is you want to fulfill life, take as much responsibility as you can on your shoulders and walk up that damn mountain.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because that's what is human ingenuity. Human beings come alive that way, which means it's partnership between God and man throughout Genesis to Revelation.
Mhm.
See?
May I pose a question to the group?
Mhm.
Because it's about that, and it's about the story that you came up with, or you told in the very beginning of the farmers that are so content.
Yeah, right.
I've often thought about what it would be like if I just like owned a coffee shop or a bookstore or something in a small town, and like I did everything, it was just kept to myself, and
Right.
I interact with people, and I can disciple the person that walks in my front a little bit, but for the most part, I just kind of do my own thing.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of contentment,
Mm-hmm.
but am I actually
Correct.
fulfilling my purpose?
Right. Right. Right.
Mhm.
I mean, thoughts on that?
I've definitely had thoughts of like I just want to become a farmer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what a simple life,
Yeah.
and how beautiful. And like if you didn't worry about like I don't need a Ferrari if I'm in the small town. I'm not going to aspire to have that nice car, that big
Right.
house or whatever. Like, even if I might use it for the good,
Right.
and,
Right.
I don't need to aspire to that. Like it would be nice. Like I'm content and
Yeah.
just being. But the real question for me is like what I was going and thinking about this whole time was how can we get to that contentment
Correct.
Mhm.
while also fulfilling God's purpose for us?
Mhm.
Right.
Because
So
we have everyone in this room has a lofty goal in
right,
front of us.
or I would define more. I mean, as a calling, right? So you have a calling. I think to distill that, just my couple of thoughts on that is contentment. What I was referring to is actually the intrinsic worth. What I was talking about. It's not the extrinsic of what you're doing versus who I am.
Mhm.
Right, so that's the idea. Is you could be a farmer in Guntur, India, or you could be Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You both can sit at the same table. Question is, it's not the aesthetic, what you do on the outside. What's your worth on the inside?
Yeah.
Like, what's the joy? So the Apostle Paul, joy for the Christian is central. Like happiness is peripheral. So the joy, the contentment, the worth on the inside. And the observation is the more the material possessions, the more the material wisdom, the more the advancement, the lesser the contentment.
Mhm.
And those two are actually corollaries, which is interesting, it's fascinating. But the lesser, and Jesus talks about this. I mean, he says it's easier for a camel to eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Well, why? You know, materialism has its perils, you know? So I think in that context, it's very interesting to see how contentment looks like and the joy of the Lord, being content with what we have, as opposed to if you're in a world like this in LA, you wake up, there's another thing to achieve.
Yeah.
There's another thing, and then there's another thing, and then there's another. It's never enough.
Yeah.
It's never enough.
It's reminding me in Tozer, there's a chapter in The Pursuit of God that talks about Abraham, how he was a man of wealth and possessions, but the possessions did not have him.
Right.
And it kind of, I mean,
that's
I
the
think
idea. Right.
fundamentally, like, we need to be constantly like reflecting on these things. Like, if you are in a world of, there's a lot of inputs telling you, shouting at you what you need to be, what you need to have,
Right.
the more you need to be really solid in that core identity to allow you to be in a place where there are many inputs and distractions, but still be in a place where those things do not have you.
Correct.
So, yeah,
I think it's the cost of discipleship. I think to live, give us this day our daily bread. Is how do I be not autonomous today with you, God? That's hard.